Welcome to this week's rant, which is being recorded for the second time. And it's not Sunday because I recorded it on Sunday and the gremlins crept back into the woodwork. And so I'm recording this one again. And I've got to record next week's again, which I'm pre-recording. So if you see me in the same outfit next week, you'll know why. This week's rant is entitled Drum Wars, all will become clear in a minute. But before we get going, we have to do the normal parish notices, which are, if you haven't subscribed, why not? If you want to be notified about when videos are posted to the channel, that's the bell icon you want to click as well. If you like the contents of the video, that's the thumbs up you need to give it. Really helps the video on the YouTube algorithm. Become a member of the TMTG community. The link address is down there, as are the Facebook and Instagram feeds where all the other stuff is announced. But now, back to the video. So why have I entitled this video Drum Machine Wars? Sorry, I'm sitting on my microphone cable. Well, over the years, there's been a number of pivotal drum machines that I think about when I think about drum machines. The first one I think about is the CR78, the Roland CompuRhythm drum machine. Now, why is that pivotal? Well, it's probably pivotal because it was used a lot by Phil Collins. And if you are subscribed to the channel, you know that I think Genesis and Phil Collins are a great group because I've been to see them many times and I've actually got tickets to go and see them when they actually eventually perform, which is not going to be this year, it's going to be next year now because of COVID. But Phil Collins used this CR78, the Roland CR78, a lot on both his Face Value album. It gave you those sort of daunting drum beats of the Face Value album and it also was used on the Genesis tracks around the same time. So that was the first one. Then the next one I always think about when I think about classic drum machines, and don't worry because as I'm talking, I should have said that the machine would pop up over here. The next one that I think about when I talk about classic drum machines is the Lindrum. The likelihood of me ever owning a Lindrum is pretty slim, as is the likelihood of me owning the CR78 or the next one I'm going to talk about after the Lindrum. Pretty slim, unless one pops up on a website or somebody donates it to me. Anyway, the reason why the Lindrum is so pivotal in my memory is because I'm a child of the 80s, okay? That's where my love of synthesizers came from, because I'm a child of the 80s. And pretty much, I'll say pretty much, a lot of the pop tunes that came out of the 80s used the Lindrum. And when I say pop tunes, I'm talking about rock tunes as well, because if you go behind the scenes of a lot of these rock acts in the 80s, the Lindrum was there somewhere, providing either fills or providing sort of a much wider percussion track to the group and the drummer. There was the LM1, which was the first computer, well, what they called the first real computer-based drum machine. But the one we all recognise is probably the LM2. That's the one that sort of gets sort of like wheeled out on YouTube and such like. But as I said, a lot of the records that I listened to in the early 80s was pretty much based, or there was a Lindrum in there somewhere. And if it wasn't a Lindrum, in those sort of 80s rock and pop records, it was an Oberheim DMX. So, pretty much those two drum machines are pivotal around this time for rock and pop. And I kind of exaggerated when I said all of them, but they were used on a lot of those tracks that hit the top 40 on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, I don't know. I've never owned an Oberheim, and I said I'm not likely to own an Oberheim or a Lin. But my understanding is that both these machines, you could change the EPROMs on them. So effectively, you could burn new drum sounds onto an EPROM, and then you could load those in. So rather than doing what we do now, which is sort of just get a USB stick and load the samples into your machine, back in those days, it was open the machine up, get the chip calipers out, take the old chip out, put the new chip in, and hopefully you didn't bend the pins on while you were doing it. But that was the next drum machine I think about. Then I come on to think about, something slightly more than a drum machine, so being able to get your own samples in. And I was fortunate back in the day to be able to play with the EMU SP12 and the SP1200. Again, they are going for ridiculous money now. A good copy of one of those machines. I actually have discs for them here, which I can't load at the moment. But I sort of look at this, and why do I think about the SP12? Well, I think about the SP12 and the 1200 because it had 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. It was a sampler. You sampled the drums into the machine, and you were then able to effectively reproduce those drum sounds across the machine workings. And then we come on to probably what a lot of people think about when we talk about drum machines, the TR-808. The one that was a commercial flop for Roland. In fact, Roland had stopped making TR-808s when they became famous by the sort of dance genre that hit the late 80s. So, they thought, everyone dismissed the TR-808 because it was too electronic sounding. Well, guess what? In the late 80s, we had dance music, which was completely electronic sounding. And the TR-808 really, at that point, hit its mark, as did its older brother, younger brother, the TR-909. So both of these, and the 909 really was sort of the house garage version of the 808, but both these machines were pivotal, and I mean pivotal, in the dance scene that erupted in the late 80s because of that electronic sound, which was the electronic sound of that genre. Roland, had a number of other drum machines which I never thought were really quite pivotal, but other people may argue with me. Things like the 707, the 606, but when I talk about sort of a legacy drum machine, they're the kind of drum machines that I always think about. And they're pretty much all classics now and very expensive to purchase. As I say, there's probably a number of other drum machines that people will scream at the. Well, scream may be a bit sort of I don't know, forceful, but people will be saying, "No, you forgot this." But they're not the ones I think about. I'm talking about the ones I think about. But I'm setting a scene of legacy drum machines, the ones that when we're talking about drum machines, we start to sort of hark back to those drum machines of that kind of era and say they were the ones. So what happened to the manufacturers of these magic drum machines? Well, over the last couple of years, there seems to have been a revival in the beat making industry. A lot of people now are sort of stepping into this making beats on the fly type arena. And a drum machine allows you to do that really, really quickly. You can set a pattern up and that pattern will play and repeat. And then you can set other patterns up that sort of modify the pattern you originally set up. And eventually you can construct a tune out of it. And let's face it, so many records have been based on, a tune of so many bars being played of that beat and then this beat and then a fill and then this beat. And when you go and look at it, it is one of these classic drum machines that's been doing it. So a lot of companies have been going back to this area and starting to reissue or reimagine. And I think reimagine is quite a good word for what these companies seem to be doing at the moment. That mimic the original or try to sort of improve the original while keeping the feel of the original there. Now, for a number of years, other manufacturers have tried to clone drum machines. I mean, the 808 has been cloned by so many people over the years in terms of it's an 808. It's not an 808. An 808 is this great big box and has a very distinctive sound. Now, people have got close to the 808 and the 909, and I've been in possession of drum machines that have been very close, but they're not an 808 and a 909. And the user community has constantly asked Roland to reissue the 808 and the 909, and it's always fallen on deaf ears. And I suspect the reason why it fell on deaf ears has been the fact that the 808 and the 909 has certain parts in them that you can't buy anymore. Plus the fact, there seems to have been this reluctance to look backwards. It's always sort of looking forwards. What's the new best whizzy thing? But there's a lot of capital in these old machines. But Roland did produce drum machines in the intervening period, and it actually produced very good drum machines in the intervening period. But you can't remember what they are. And that's the point of the 808 and the 909. You can remember the 808 and the 909. You can remember the Lindrum. But you can't remember the ones that Roland produced in the middle or other manufacturers produced in the middle because they just weren't pivotal. And I've got, sitting on the bench here, I've got the R5, which Roland produced, and sitting over there, I've got the R8. There's the R5. These were perfectly good drum machines. And that's a good drum machine. That's a good drum machine. But they're not the ones you would think about when we would talk about a drum machine. What happened to Lynn? Well, Lynn moved into a market space called the Music Production Centre, and effectively helped Akai launch the MPC range. So the MPC range, Music Production Centre, was actually built on the technology that Lynn developed before, effectively, I think the company went bust. And Mr. Lynn moved over to Akai to work with Akai. And he carried on doing that for a number of years, actually, until I think Akai was purchased by Novation, if I remember correctly, and there was shall we say, a disagreement on principles between Mr. Lynn and Mr. Novation. I can't remember what the guy's name was now, but apparently they didn't see eye to eye, and they had money issues between the two of them, and the partnership sort of fell to pieces. But that's where he went. He went there, and then eventually he returned to the drum machine market, launching something called the Tempest, I think about 10 years ago. But again, while it was kind of built on the LM2, it wasn't pivotal, the way I put it. Oberheim went bust. Many of the synth manufacturers of this time went bust. That's pretty much the way they went. They're the only ones that really survived through this sort of whole period were the ones that actually, even Korg almost went bust, but had to be rescued by Yamaha, if the truth be known. So Oberheim went bust, and is still around. The guy behind Oberheim, Mr. Oberheim, he's still around. He's still in the pro market. Until a few years ago, he was actively selling pro audio gear. And then EMU, well, EMU was a really sad story, and I did a piece on this quite a while back now. But they were bought by Creative Systems. They were merged with Ensoniq. Creative then effectively took the technology of Ensoniq and EMU and sort of bolted it into their Sound Blaster cards. They released a couple of synthesizers after the merger, and then effectively the company names have sort of slowly withered out of existence, and the divisions that worked on that particular side of the company also disappeared. So I think Creative still own the names and the trademarks to EMU and Ensoniq, but the companies are long since gone. But in essence, the drum machine market sort of kind of died a little bit, really, with the advent of sampling technology, and people were pushed towards samplers as opposed to dedicated drum machines. So you would have your sampler, you would sample the kick drum, you would have your sequencer would play the sample, and you wouldn't actually have a drum machine. You'd use your sampler and your drum machine. And quite simply, that's what musicians did. That was the way the market shifted, and the drum machines disappeared from the market for a period of time.